What's up guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video we're talking about fast days front forks. If you got an old Klx kit or a new 13 to 18 CRF kit and you want to run it on your 19 plus CRF, I'm going to answer all your questions right now. Check it out. So if you're looking for a front fork option for your bike and you want to run a 6 setup that's all inclusive, I'm really happy with this stuff thus far. I'm not a professional rider, I'm not an ex-pro, I don't ride at like an insane level. I jump jumps, I ride what I would say is fairly hard. But with my experience, this is a really cool kit for the money and you get a lot of cool stuff out of it. So you get inverted forks, you get a disc brake front wheel, you do not get a tire, but you get a disc brake front wheel with a pretty big rotor, it's already black, and you also get a brake caliper. This is a used caliper, but it's dual piston, comes with a stainless steel hardline, and you get a lever that looks pretty good. The whole setup for about 900 bucks plus some shipping costs. So if you're looking for a solution to bolt onto the front of your bike, you'll be able to do so if you buy my adapter stem, and we're gonna talk about that now. So there's two different kits here. This is the Klx kit, this is the CRF kit, 13 to 18 CRF specifically. Let's talk about the Klx kit first and what you gotta do to get it on your bike. The stem, of course, is the biggest thing here. There's not a bolt-on option for the 19 plus CRF yet. I'm sure there will be very soon. But as of right now, there is not, which is why I'm making this video. These stems are machined from aluminum. They're very nice. It's a 1,000th tolerance fit. It's a press fit. You need to use a press to install it. You can try to hammer it, but I do not recommend it, and I will absolutely not warranty it if that's how you choose to install it. Before you install the stem, you're gonna wanna cut the steering stops off. They're gonna be in the way and hit the frame. You can do a couple different things to make a new solution for a steering stop. You could prep this and weld a new stop on it. That would take some work. You could just leave it how it is. You could put a stop on your frame. I'll leave that up to you. This lower clamp will not work properly if you do not cut off the factory steering stops. Once you press the stem through, you press a bearing on. It's all Honda spec as far as bearings are concerned. Then I used Klx spec spanner and top nuts because they're a lot easier to get than the CRF spec stuff. For the top clamp, you don't have to do anything to it, no modification required. It has this sweep forward clamp design to move the bars forward, which is pretty cool for space, but it does make the bike steer a bit different because you now have your bars over the front wheel a little bit more than before. So that's, I guess, all personal preference, but it may change the way you ride your bike. And then it has a very tall clamp, which puts the bars a lot higher. So if you're running like a CRF XR50 rise bar, they're gonna sit pretty high up there. Not quite ape hangers, but you're heading in that direction. So that may be something you wanna change or at least consider. Other things to note with this setup is that there is no number plate provision for the CRF, and there's also not a key mount. I relocated my key / low fuel level light to the inside of my left shroud. You can do it however you'd like. I had to lengthen some wires to make that happen, but as it comes, there is not gonna be an option to mount your key. There's also not gonna be an option to mount your front number plate. The CRF uses two 6mm bolts, one here and one here roughly, to hold that front number plate in place. You will not have that with this. I ran zip ties for a long time and it worked fine and you can't see them at all, but that is also another thing to think about. If you are OCD and want to have everything bolt together, you're gonna have to make an option. You can definitely make something that bolts here, like a bracket that's long and has a 90-degree bend in it, and you can mount to that. That's up to you, but that is something you will want to do probably. Lastly, the Klx legs. I believe they're 730 millimeters, but they are significantly longer than the CRF legs. About 4 inches longer than the CRF counterpart. So if you want to run them, you're going to need a big swing arm. You're probably going to want a shock extender, et cetera, to get the ride height looking level and work. You can also run these up in the clamps, but if you want to run them looking like flush with the top clamp, it's going to be choppered out if you don't have a rear solution to balance it out. Now let's talk about the 13 to 18 CRF forks. Most notable differences from the Klx setup is going to be the top clamp. It's got no forward sweep for the bar mounts. These are adjustable, but only like 1 or 2 clicks, so you don't have a ton of range there. And then it does have a removable key mount, which will not work because it does not have a provision for the gas light. And then front number plate mounts. You do have 2 mounts here. They do line up, but it looks so far like the number plate's gonna have to come from the bottom and the bolts are gonna have to go up like this, which is less than ideal for installation, but at least they're there and they do look nice. So we'll get into that more when I install the plate itself. Lower clamp, this one's already had the stem installed with the bearings. This is the steel stem that came out of it. Significantly heavier. Aluminum stems are not taboo in any way. I've run mine for over a year on my old setup. Never had a problem, but for whatever reason they decided to use steel and it is much, much heavier. The steering stops do appear to work, or if nothing else, they don't have to get grinded off. They may not actually stop the forks early enough, but they might, so we'll see how that pans out. And then the lower mount for the fender looks to be perfect. The spacing is proper, and when I bolted mine on, it seemed to sit exactly right, but I didn't have a wheel in place. So until I do that, I'm not gonna know for certain. So for this next clip, I'm gonna cut to some iPhone footage. Unfortunately, my memory card was full, but I filmed everything with an iPhone. It's very dark, but you'll be able to see what's going on. It's a clip of how to install the stem in the clamp. I'm gonna walk you through how to pop out your stock one, how to put your new one on, and then put the bearings on, and then we're gonna cut to right back to where we are right now, where we grease this bearing. Now, the reason for greasing this bearing on the stem rather than before, it's definitely more difficult, and there is a chance that you will not get as much grease inside here, but I do not want to get grease all over my stem and all over my press. That's the reason for that. So check this clip out. We'll be right back. We'll come to here, and we'll get it installed on the bike. All right, this is gonna be a little bit dark, but you should be able to see what I'm talking about. So this is the clamp that comes with your forks, the 13 to 18 Fast Ace CRF forks. This is exactly how they're gonna show up. This lower clamp's gonna have this steel stem in. The first thing you have to do before you can do anything else is press this stem out. We're gonna set it here in this press contraption that we've got, and we're gonna pop it out. It's up to you how you wanna do this. If you wanna try to put wood in there, you can. It might crush the wood, but it should be fine as long as you press it dead straight. You're not gonna kill these threads or ruin this. We're gonna get rid of this stem, but if you wanna save it for later use or whatever, keep that in mind when you press it out. And she's out. Once you have the steel stem out, you're going to inspect it. Just take a look at it. That one was really, really tight. It varies, just a little bit of inconsistency with their machining. So now you're gonna flip it over and you'll notice that there's a small lip. Your new stem is gonna sit down in the base of that. So when you look at the two side by side, you can see there's multiple outer diameters here. This is gonna be the only one visible from the bottom side of the lower clamp. You're gonna set this in. Be very careful when you set this through not to drag these threads on anything. It is aluminum, and if you do, there's a good chance you'll mess it up. Get it in there. Make sure there's nothing underneath so you don't, again, mess up those threads. And once it's in position, it's gonna sit like that. It's not gonna go through. I highly recommend against hitting this through with a hammer. You can probably do it, but if you press it, you'll know it'll be nice, even pressure, and it's a lot safer. So we're gonna pick this up and move it to a little bit closer height, and we're gonna press the new one in, and then we're gonna put the bearing on. All right, for the next step, you got your stem in. It's held in place by the press fit. You want to press the bearing on. So we're heating the bearing with a heat gun. It makes it a little bit easier to get it on. I would say that this is something you should definitely do. If you take it to a machine shop, they're going to do all this for you. So this is really just for someone in their garage who wants to make it happen on the weekend, or you don't want to pay a machinist, which I completely understand. Once you get the bearing heated up and you have your clamp in position, it's going to be very hot. I'm going to grab it with this. It's pretty terrible option, but the taper again goes from big to small, and this is exactly how it's going to sit right here. So you're going to pick it up, try not to cook your hand, and get it past those threads, and now you can see it's going to press on. To press it on, you need to use a pipe or a piece of tube that will not collapse. So a thick enough wall, something or another that you have sitting around, that will evenly press around all sides of the bearing, like so. I do want to make note that my dust cover was on before. Don't forget the dust cover. And we're all the way down. The finished product should look something like this. The bearing is very hot, otherwise I would show you that it spins freely. This is definitely not the fun part, but it is a necessary evil unless you want to ruin your bearings in a couple days. Now, I recommend wearing latex gloves and having a couple of shop towels on standby. It's definitely a messy process. Do your best to keep it clean now so that when you put it on your bike, it doesn't get stuff everywhere. The real way to do this is to drag the bearing through your palm when your palm is full of grease. Obviously, we cannot do that since it's installed, so. Okay, I got all my grease on there. I cleaned it up. You can tell it's all packed in the seam. That's what you really want to look for. You don't want to hear metal on metal when you're rotating the bearing. Make sure it's nice and lubricated. I got my spanner nut here. I'm going to cut to a clip that talks about how to install these races for these tapered bearings now, and then I'll be right back. First, you're going to want to remove the OEM bearing races. To do this, you're going to take a flathead screwdriver and a hammer and evenly move around the base of that bearing flange, tapping as you go. You're going to do the same thing for the top flange until they're both removed and out of your way. Clean that gunk out. You're going to put fresh grease on these bearings, or at least I recommend that you do. So we're going to wipe this thing out, and then we'll show you how to put the new races in. So when you go to tap your new bearings in, a dead blow hammer or like a brass hammer like this is what you want to use so you don't mar up the bearing. So once you get the race in, again, keep in mind the taper drops like this. So we have a larger ID at the top and a smaller ID at the bottom, and that's so the bearing sits in properly. If you do this backwards, you will have to knock it out and redo it. It will absolutely not work the other way. A lot of people have asked about the height of the race. This is normal. You do want it to stick out. I'd say it's roughly an 1/8 inch, maybe a little bit more. That's completely normal, and there is a dust shield that will go on there as well. So we'll show you that. Bottom race is the same exact thing. For the lower race, it's gonna actually sit up inside the head tube. You can see here too, there's not as much room on the top as there is on the bottom. You want the race to completely disappear inside the head tube. And he's using the old race here to tap it in. You can do it that way or a different way, but you get the idea. It's completely up in there. So to show you one more time what that looks like with the bearings, you can see the taper is going down for the top bearing. Sits in there nice and smooth. And the opposite for the bottom. Okay, so with the bearing races in place, I'm going to pop this up. Got my grease everywhere, like I said. My top bearing's in place. I don't have that rubber trim piece or whatever that is, that plastic piece on this one specifically. I lost it, I think, when I did this the first time, so I recommend running it, but you don't have to. This top one is also like a press fit, so it is gonna be a little bit tight getting that bearing down on the stem itself. Take my spanner nut and run it down. I'm gonna wipe the stem down, and then I'm gonna tap the spanner nut until it's tight. You can get a spanner nut wrench. I don't have one. This will chew up the edge. What I'm gonna do is put a flathead screwdriver like that and tap it like that. I don't really care if I tear this up a little bit, but if you do, make sure you get a wrench that won't do as much damage to the aluminum. I'm gonna turn this all the way to the right so it's maxed out. Take this and tap it into place. Make sure it's not crazy hard to turn. And for me, that's all I'm gonna do because these bearings are used and they've already been broken in. If you've got brand new bearings, they're definitely going to break in, so to speak, and you're going to notice a difference. The front end may actually loosen up a couple days after you install it and have ridden it a little bit. I'm gonna go ahead and grab my top clamp and we'll get that installed. Before you put the clamp in position, make sure you snug these lower bolts. I'm actually gonna crank on them as tight as possible to get them in place. It's a 13mm socket. These are a lot harder to get to once it's installed. Top bolts are left loose. If you want to figure out what size Allen this is, go ahead and do that now while you can carry it to your toolbox. I'm going to throw on a flat washer here, and then I have a aftermarket nut. I got this nut from Faster Minis. It's a red nut, but it's a KLX110 spec thread. Run that down until it's snug, and then I'm going to go grab my fork legs. The side Allen bolts require a 6mm Allen wrench. I went ahead and threw a tire on this rim. This is a Midas tire, so it's super wide. So don't use it for reference for anything other than the fact that it is a tire. I wanted to make sure the forks and everything were in alignment. Got the wheel bolted on. All that is pretty standard. Once you have your stem in, it just goes together like a normal front end until you get to where we're at now. So first, we got the key mount. Now my key mount sits inside the shroud right here. It's a little bit tough to see. I trimmed off a ton of stuff and then I used one of the airbox mounts for it. You can go that route if you want. It's a little bit harder to get to, but not really. Easily turn it, no big deal. If you want to put it there, you can. If you want to make a custom mount using this tab, obviously you're welcome to do that too. I'm going to throw the front number plate on first so we have that lower baseline that we need. We know we can't go higher or lower than that. To do so, it's an M5.8 bolt, different than what you may expect. I think these were originally M6 by 1.0 pitch. So I got my M5, I have an extended socket and an extension on that as well. I'm gonna go from the bottom. You do wanna use a big washer because it will push all the way through. And it's a little tough. Nice and sturdy, good to go. Once that fender locks in, it'll be fine. Now that the number plate's in position, I can raise my fender up, lock in my front tab here, and I can look at my positioning back and forth. I'm gonna play around with some spacers for a minute and try to find the best option. I'll tell you what that size is. We can put the front brakes on and the front end will be done. 3/8 long. It's gotta be M6 ID, and this is a 1/2 inch in OD, but it doesn't really matter. Just make sure it's 3/8 long. This is all you need. Pop that on there. One on the other side and one on the back, and the fender sits pretty much perfect. We're gonna save the rear spacer for last. Just get these front two started. Make sure you lock in that number plate and get it in the right spot. Once you get the front two in position, you can just slide that rear spacer in pretty easily. To show you what the clearance looks like with those fender spacers in there, my rear is extremely close, and again, your airbox is different, but we're looking to get the tire to sit properly, or the fender to sit properly over the tire. We want that arch to look right. So That's what we're going for. And also this gap here between the number plate and the fender needs to look right. To me, that looks perfect. For the front brake assembly, I like to do it lever first and let the caliper hang down. Be very careful not to push this lever in when the reservoir is upside down or anything like that, so you don't introduce air bubbles into the system. Before you can mount the caliper, there's a piece of plastic in here that's used to keep it from being depressed during shipping. You're gonna wanna back this Phillips head off. It can be a little bit difficult to do. And then remove this piece of plastic here. You have to do this before you can install the caliper. This screw is gonna go back in. It's gonna end up being your lever stop. So you're gonna wanna pull the lever out before you run it all the way in. And now as we make our way down to the caliper, wanna make sure you have your hose or your line in the fork guard mount if you're gonna use that. I like to run it on the inside, which is what they do on most bikes, and I think most people would agree that is the proper way to do it. So make sure you run the caliper through this opening first. And then it's gonna go on here with two M6 1.0 bolts that have 10mm heads. Now mine were not included, yours might be. I had to grab these out of my parts bin. I wanna say they're like 30 or 35mm long. Honestly, I'm not sure. I'm sorry I don't have that measurement right now, but just make sure you have enough thread engagement that you can go through here and then bolt into this. Now before you put it on, you'll notice there's a piece of plastic inside here. Once you get that in position, start with one bolt here, run it through and just get it started so it's in place. It will hold your caliper. Get the lower one, do the same thing, and you can snug them up. Tighten up your fork guard here, route your line how you like to do it, and you're ready to party. All right guys, so that's gonna do it. Thank you very much for watching, and I really hope this video helps. It should answer all your questions about how to put a fast-ace front end on a 19 plus CRF110. If you do the Klx kit, it's essentially the same thing. There's a couple things you gotta figure out yourself, like number plate mounting and a key mount, but all that is personal preference and up to you until an off-the-shelf option becomes available. Thank you so much for watching. Peace out.